Welcome to the 7th week, and in today's class we will be talking about facing, because the facing is a mandatory piece in design, especially in the certain design of the clothes. So there is a purpose behind that, and I think it's pretty important to cover it and let you know, guys, why we do have facing, and especially if one day you decide to do clothes yourself, so you would know that where to use it, how to use it, and why do we need to have facing in certain areas of the clothes. So there are usually 3 types of areas where facing, you can see it. I have a couple clothes to show as an example, so you would have an understanding what am I talking about. So here I have an example. It's a quarter scale skirt and it has facing. The reason why it has facing, because as you can notice, there is no waistband. So when there is no waistband, we still have to think about how to finish the edge in a clean way. In this case, like, facing is like a second layer of fabric. So I want to read the description for you. So a facing is a small piece of fabric, separate or a part of the fabric itself, used to finish the fabric edges. So as in this example, if I turn to the wrong side, you can actually see once I do this, you can see this layer, and this layer, it's separately sewn into the waist seam. Like, this is the waistline and this is like the waist seam, because it's right on the waist, or like it's right on the waist, it can be right on the hips, like it really depends on the design, but the idea is it's sewn to the edge, so that you see it nicely folds inside, and it looks clean from outside, and also it keeps the structure of the skirt. This is quarter scale. And also saying about purpose, so facing makes a garment professionally finished with the seam hidden inside the folds of the facing. So if I turn the wrong side, like if I flip it, you can see that there are seams hidden inside, so it looks cleaner, right? And again, so it gives a finished appearance to the raw edges of the fabric. So this is the purpose. Now I will show you the examples of a real clothes with the facing inside. So as I previously covered, usually you can see facing on the neckline when, for example, your shirt or your t-shirt doesn't have the collar. So in order to give it like a clean finish, you have facing. Also, sleeveless blouses or shirts, they also have facing in the armhole, and often on the waist. If you don't have waistband on your skirt, you have facing instead. And here are the examples. So this is the skirt. Like 2 years ago I did this skirt, and it's a high waist skirt, you can see, right? And I don't have a waistband here, but instead, if I open the zipper, this is what I have inside. I have this piece is called facing, so it allows to give a clean finish to the skirt at the waistline. And if I flip it, you can see that the seam is hidden underneath. And the important thing to say is, whenever you have facing, you have to apply interfacing. So what is interfacing? Because there are different ways of, like, different types of interfacing, but a very common one is fuse. It basically it's a special material which you iron on the top of the fabric, and it gets sticked because of the glue on one of the sides. And if you can see, like, you can see that this material and this material are the same, but this one is transparent while this one is not, because if I bring it closer, there is an additional layer, and this layer is fused. So I fused it to the fabric. Why do I do it? Because basically fuse allows to keep the structure of facing. Like it helps to, let's say, especially in the waist area, it gets stretched easily, right? Like, you sit, you stand up, you move, and like the waist area gets stretched like the fabric. But when you fuse it, fuse helps to keep fabric like in the initial form and texture, so it doesn't get stretched. And also it makes the fabric a little bit stronger. So there are definitely different ways of why we have to fuse on certain areas. For example, we always fuse the area with the zipper, because zipper, like, this is something that we often use on the, like, we touch, right? So let's say you have a skirt and you open like zipper every day, like a couple of times, like several times a day, and the fuse helps to let this area not to rip quickly. So because it gives some kind of like strength to a particular part of the fabric, right? That's why we always apply fuse on the facing. There are also different types of the fuse, and the price range can change as well depending what kind of fuse it is. I remember I quickly covered this topic in the very first lesson, because there are fused like in their interfacing that can be glued, but also interfacing that has to be sewn on the fabric. I took one of the fuse that I have, like interfacing that I have at home, and this one is fusible because it has, as you can see, on one side it has glue, while on another side it has nothing. It's pretty shiny, and when we apply it on the wrong side always. And you apply, like, let's say this is fabric, and you apply glue on the fabric, and when you iron this side with the fuse, and you slowly iron until the glue melts and sticks to the fabric. And usually it has to stay for a very long time and on the fabric, but I personally noticed that sometimes when you wash the same clothes a lot of times, so over washing, the glue like disappears, and then fuse can come out a little bit, especially on the corners. So because, as I said before, there are different price range for fuse as well, and usually the cheap fuse, it doesn't have good glue either. So, and another example, except for the waistband, the waist area on the skirt, where you can have fuse is have facing, is jacket. You also very often you can see facing on the jacket, especially at the back area under the collar. So this is collar, right, of our jacket, and this part here where you have this label is facing. And I'm pretty sure that each jacket has it, but depends on the quality and price of the jacket. The inner lining of the jacket can be different, because this is not an expensive piece. It has it's a mass production jacket. So as you can see, for example, I don't even have lining inside, but I do have facing it, and also facing can be wider to allow more, more area to be covered, because as you can see, this facing allows to hide all stitches that were done in order to attach collar to the body of the jacket. And because of that, because we cover it, it looks nicer, because you don't want to wear a jacket and suddenly the seam allowance to be visible. It doesn't look nice. And this is the reason, or one of the reasons why we have facing. And if I take it off from the hanger, you can see that all this area is facing this piece. And if I flip it, first it fused, right? And second, it hides all seam allowances. Okay. Yeah. And also talking about interfacing, or as I say, fuse. I call it fuse because this is how we call it, because I would say the type of interfacing that has glue on it and you go to the store and say, I'm looking for fuse, they will understand you're looking for the interfacing with glue. Because there are different types, as I said, and saying fuse, like people understand what you're talking about. So that's why you can hear me saying either interfacing or fuse, but interfacing is like a more professional, more professional way of saying, while fuse is just something that to simplify the life, right? When you say it. Okay, so now I think we covered theory pretty much. Everything is clear. So I think to do some exercise with you, and today I want to practice with you sewing this skirt. As you can see, it's a little bit like the design of the skirt lower than the waistline, and it doesn't have waistband. So because we don't have waistband, we will sew facing to the waistline, right? And yes, pretty much. So what we will do first is I will take my fabric and I will cut the pattern pieces. I will cut pattern piece for the facing, and also I will cut fuse for my facing. And once everything is cut, we will start sewing. And we will do basically the same sample, but without a zipper, just sewing. Okay, so let's get started. To make the sample, we first will cut the pattern pieces. If you were in the class, I would definitely give you the pattern pieces so you would be able to do yourself and cut it from the fabric. Unfortunately, there is no way to to give you the pattern so you would know what exact skirt or what exact size to cut. But what you can do at home is you can cut something first, draw on the paper something very similar to this. This is a skirt, and it doesn't matter because we will use this pattern for front and for back. So all you need to do is to draw one front piece, and when you draw it, think about the side seam. It has to be a little bit curved, the hemline is straight, and the waistline is here, and waist it has to have 2 darts, because you know that at the waist area it's a little bit narrower, and we won't make a skirt a little bit narrower on the upper part of our body, right? And by the way, you probably noticed that it's not very straight, but if I close the dart, then the line gets straight. That's why it's like it has a little bit peaks on the area where I have darts, but other than that, you can really draw a straight line and practice with that, right? Another thing to mention is the facing. The facing is identical copy of the upper part of the skirt, because how facing basically is done, when you draw a pattern piece, right, you measure, let's say 2 inches down, because this one, like this is quarter scale skirt, right? But usually we do facing about 2 inches, right? So you measure 2 inches down, and you measure here down 2 inches, here down 2 inches on the center, you can measure here, and then you copy the waistline, you copy it and create create a stripe, 2 inches stripe, and that is the facing. Because if I put it above this area, it's supposed to be equal. The only reason why this area is shorter than this one is because this one has darts. But if I close the dart like this, then it is matching. It's exactly the same size, you see. So I do like this, and it is matching. Wait, here, because you see this is the line, so I put it here. It's matching. And the same with opposite side. If I close the dart and I place it here, you can see that it is matching too. So the difference between this pattern piece and this pattern piece is that this one does not have darts. Okay, so let's get started and cut the pattern. We will be cutting 2 pieces of this because we need front and back, the same as for this one. We will need front and back, plus I will cut fuse 2 pieces too, because I will stick it to front facing and to the back facing. First, what you need to do is to fuse the facing. Then we need to sew darts on the front and back skirt pieces. As you remember, we always have, when we have dart, we always have a drill hole. This is the point and this is the drill hole. And we need to measure 1/2 inch down from the drill hole and match the darts here, 1 and 2nd dart. So we fold it, we match it, and we sew it down till we hit the 1/2 inch below mark from the drill hole. So to make it easier, I will write here back piece. So I'll write that this is back and this is front. And I will keep whatever place I have the writing and the marks, I will keep it as a wrong side. So let's start. I will first fold the darts on the front skirt and then on the back skirt. I need the pins, and I will need a ruler and something to make marks on the fabric. So let's get started. Here are my drill holes. Here's drill hole. So first I hope you all remember, first I match the darts, right? And then I make sure that my drill hole gets, once I fold it, the dart, the drill hole has to be in the middle, right in the middle of the fold line. And then I mark 1/2 inch down from the drill hole. But I want to do on this side because I'll be sewing on this side. So 1/2 inch down, and I will connect this point with notch here. So this will be my line. I will do back tack here. I will sew all the way down and I will keep sewing until I leave 1 inch extra thread tail. Now we will attach back and front skirt at the side seam. So as usually we put right side on the right side. So on outside we will see all the dart, the seam allowance, the thread, and we will make sure that it perfectly aligns on top of each other and pin it. Now we will attach front and back facing. Again, right side on the right side. We need to match the side seam. And when you will be attaching side seam, make sure that you stitch 1/2 inch, because on the side seam we usually have 1/2 inch seam allowance. We finished sewing the skirt and we finished sewing the facing. Now we need to attach facing to the skirt. When we attach it, just to remind you, we will be attaching with right side on the right side. So right side of the facing to the right side of the skirt. To make it easier, oh, by the way, also, when you will be attaching the facing, you can see that one side, the upper, like this line, is narrower than the lower line. It means that it has to be attached like this, because closer to the waist, the skirt is narrower, right? So don't confuse, don't do it upside down. All right, so we'll start to attach, and first we'll start with the side seam. And also, as you remember, we always have notch at the center front and notch at the center back. I also do have the same notch here on the facing. It will help you to understand if facing lines perfectly and it matches the skirt itself. And as I said, I will start with the side seam. I'll make sure that my stitch lines match. Okay, one pin, and basically I will go around the skirt and pin it everywhere. Next, where I'm gonna pin it is at the center, because first, what I like to do, I like to pin at the notches, but then I can fix the rest. Now I will pin another side seam. So far the size matches, and now the center back. Here's the notch, here's another notch attached. Here, pin. Okay, so I pin it in 4 places. Now I will pin it in between. Here. Now here. Actually, I will pin it on the dart because when I will be sewing, I want to make sure that my dart will not flip and it will be facing the center. I'll pin one more here. When we will be attaching the facing to the skirt, we need to have 1/4 inch seam allowance. 1/4 inch is approximately, let me show you this way. So as you remember, the distance from here to here is 1 inch. This is 1/2 inch. This is what this distance, this is what we use for side seam. and half of this is quarter. So distance from here till here is quarter. So this is the seam allowance that we're going to have for our waistline. After we attach facing to the skirt, we need to do top stitch. We have to top stitch the facing. Basically what we do is we do additional stitch line 1/16 away from the waistline, and also while we do the stitch line we have to make sure that seam allowance get attached to the facing, because doing this top stitch will allow to keep facing in the right direction, that it will never flip over and won't move. It will just basically stay where it's supposed to stay always. And also it will give like additional stitch line will give more strength at the waist area of the skirt. Again, top stitch is usually a very tiny stitch. It's only 1/16 away from the original stitch line. If 1/16 is too small, do 1/8, but ideally it's 1/16. Just to remind you how much it is, here is the ruler, and the distance from here, so basically this is 1 inch, right? This is 1/2 inch, 1/4 inch. This line here is 1/8, and this line, this distance here is 1/16. Top stitch has to be 1/16. Now we need to fold it inside and iron it. And also, thanks to the top stitch of the facing, we can easily fold it. The very last step is because we want to make sure that the facing will not flip at the side seams, right? We have 2 side seams here. This is the side seam. Our facing also has seam allowance as our skirt, and we need to tack it. So basically what I will do, I will grab the, do it close. Okay, so these are seam allowances, right? I will grab the seam allowance here and I will do a short stitch line. So basically I will stitch here on the sewing machine. It's called to make a tack, and thanks to that tack, this facing will always stay on the place. It will not, flip up. The same with opposite seam allowance. I just grab the I just grab these seam allowances of both facing and the skirt, and now I pin it, but then I will get to the sewing machine and do a stitch. Again, I will stitch only the seam allowances inside. We gave the skirt the final press, and here's the result. The quarter scale skirt with facing inside, plus facing is fused. That's the end of our class today. Thank you for joining me, and hope you will try to make this skirt with facing at home yourself. If you have any questions, you can ask me on Wednesday at 1 p.m. on Facebook. I will be there waiting for you during the live video. So enjoy the rest of your week, and bye-bye.